I think it's up and running. There we go. Awesome. Okay, we did a test run and we had the exact same problem yesterday, even though I fixed it. But is the Twitch stream going well? Is the Facebook stream going well? Are we all in good shape? Okay, good. Well, thanks for having me, everybody. Thanks for tuning in on Facebook. Thanks for tuning in on Twitch. Thanks to everybody who's involved with the Bionicle Day. And we're going to have fun. I'm here to answer your questions about the time that I spent drawing the Lego Bionicle comic book. Let's see. Do we have somebody who's going to manage the Twitch feed and send me questions, I think, because I'm able to see the Facebook feed. But Liam, if you can manage the Twitch and send me some pertinent questions, that will be great. Let's see. So I'm being asked about the Rhode Island Con. I haven't heard an update on that for a while. I'm going to try to go to the Rhode Island Con. It looks like I am going to be able to go to the Chicago or the New York Comic Con after all. So if any of you guys are comic book fans and Bionicle fans, come see me there. Let's see. So Adam Fields is here. I see Steve is here. Zane Zielinski is here. Lots of faces that I know, so this will be good. Let's see. For those who don't know, I should really give a more formal introduction of who I am. I'm Stuart Sayger. I draw comics for a living. The pieces behind me here are a couple Batmans that I did for DC Comics and Warner Brothers. I actually got to work on the Man of Steel movie, and I've worked on a lot of things you probably know. I did a cover for The Walking Dead. Right now, I'm doing comics for Army of Darkness, Evil Ernie, the rock band Kiss. I did those recently. I just did a cover for Alice Cooper, who's got a new graphic novel coming out. So all that is pretty great, but that is not really where I cut my teeth. The Bionicle was sort of the big job that I had made some comics before. I actually broke into comic books, self-publishing a comic book. This is the first comic I ever made right here. It's a self-published title I did called Shiver in the Dark. This is the first printing of it, and this is actually a third printing of it. I was busy working on the fourth issue of the book when I actually got approached by DC Comics to do a lot of work for them. Ended up doing some trading card artwork for, what was it? A game called Versus that Upper Deck put out. And, if you do good work and people like it, they usually ask you to do more. I didn't expect to have the Bionicle job come to me on the heels of doing all that trading card work, but that's kind of what happened. They, I think the Bionicle comic book, from what I understand, was coming out from DC and had been coming out for a while, and Lego was interested in maybe changing up how they wanted to promote the Bionicle toy line. They were considering maybe not making the Lego comic book, the Bionicle comic book anymore, and DC Comic Books wanted to keep it going. It was a good client, and frankly, I think DC Comics said, well, before you decide you don't want the comic, let's see if we can reinvent it, turn it into something you're interested in. And it seems that Lego communicated the audience they were trying to reach with their newer line of toys, and DC said, well, let's reimagine the comic book. And so I was asked to try out for Lego Bionicle. They had told me they were looking for a different art style. Thank you for the comment, Chris. And so they asked me to make a piece, but the piece of art that I thought they would ask me to make would be one that was kind of more in line with what a lot of the other artists had done. I'm turning off my phone so you won't hear it ring, you guys. Let's turn the ring volume all the way down. That's good. But I just thought because they were robots, or at least they look like robots, I thought they needed to be drawn in really clean, literal style. And the people who asked me to try it for the job said, no, don't do that. Just be yourself. And I'm sort of known for having a very loose kind of painterly style, which you guys know from the comic book. I can show you some things I've done more recently. This is an original Joker drawing I did not terribly long ago, and you can see it's got my trademarks, kind of loose, scratchy style with some atmosphere to it. A lot of white paint added to the illustration, and so I made a piece of art for them that was made in that style, but it was of as I said, some of the Bionicles, and I thought they were going to just say, yeah, you went too far, we don't want this. But they really liked it, and apparently so did Lego. I wasn't the only artist who was tried out for this job, but the others who were asked to try out, there were about 7 or 9 of us or so, and might have been more, but there were about 7 of 9 of us that were considered the best. And then our sample pieces were colored and presented to different kids to vote on which they liked. They had focus groups. And after about 3 months of different trials, they ended up offering me the job. And it was really kind of a big breakthrough for me. I had only drawn self-published comics prior to this and done some trading cards for DC. But this was the first comic book I'd ever done for another publisher. And it was kind of a big contract for DC. It was clearly big for DC and Lego, and then giant for me. So they had offered me the job before they realized I hadn't done much comic book work. The sample was good, though. And so I just told my editor, I said, I'll work very hard for you and I'll do the work on time, but you have to be prepared that I might ask some dumb questions. And he said that was fine. And honestly, Jay Gardner was my first editor, and he was a wonderful editor. He kind of held my hand through some of the process. And I did some things on the book that were different than a lot of other artists typically did. Like my art was grayscale, as you saw, like the sample I did. It wasn't just strict black and white. I used some paints, I used some graphite, I used oil pastel, anything that I thought would give me a mark I used it, and that made it a little bit harder to color. So they tested a couple colorists to find someone who fit really well for me. But in the end, I think, you guys know the Bionicle comic book, the history of the comic book better than I do. I really know the work I did best. You guys know the things that Liam did and the other artists. But I think that if you took all the artists and said, who looks most alike, who's the most unique, who's different, I'm probably the one that really seems most different. By the way, did the Facebook feed freeze? It looks as though my OBS feed is still going, but Facebook might be acting a little bit odd, which is very frustrating because I have a brand new computer I'm using. How is this working here? Let's see, I'm checking to see how the feed is going. Steve, can you write in the Facebook and let me know if this is still working well for you? My tab just crashed. We're going to relaunch. So it looks like Tom Kelly, looks like you're back. Thanks, Tom. Tom, I wish I had some new Kiss news for you. Did I tell you that I just did an Alice Cooper cover? It's not Kiss, but we're getting close. It looks like Steve is back. Steve or Liam, if you can put something in the Facebook comments and let me know that we're up and running, that would be great. Or at least over at Twitch, I mean. For those who don't know, San Pellegrino. You guys need to sponsor me. It's the great thirst quencher during these live feeds. Okay, so we're back on Twitch. We are live. Awesome. I'm not sure where I got cut off. I was talking about how I got the Bionicle job in the first place. So I'll back up to where I think things maybe went a little bit sour. I was asked to try out for Lego Bionicle. It was kind of interesting because I had done some trading cards for DC, but the big thing happened was I was in Philadelphia. I was promoting my self-published Shiver in the Dark comic book, and I had an art director from DC Comics ask me if they could have some copies of this to take back to the office, and I thought, you know what? I'm trying to sell these, you guys. I don't want to give them away, but I thought if a DC editor asks you for a free copy to take to the office, you probably ought to give it to them. Well, they saw it, and that's how they asked me to try out for Bionicle. I remember I was talking to Jay Gardner, who's the original editor. He approached me to try out for the job, and I thought they were crazy because I tend to paint in this really loose, kind of expressive style. I thought there was no way that I would get the job, just because I was used to, here's my Axon toy. Usually when you draw something that's this mechanical and this detailed, you draw in a really clean, detailed style. But Lego wanted something different. Lego had done the Bionicle comic book for a while, and they were looking to sort of change things up. And they weren't quite sure what they wanted, but they talked to DC, and Lego talked about the demographics they wanted to get, what the fans they were hoping to reach. And DC suggested a grittier, more stylized look. And Lego as near as I can tell, wasn't completely sold on the idea. But DC said, let us pitch it to you. And so DC had myself and several other artists make sample pieces, and mine was deemed one of the better ones. And they took mine as well as some other artists, and they had them all colored, and then showed those to focus groups for children. And when all was said and done, I was offered the job. I was kind of blown away, because when I was asked to try out for it, I figured that I should, look at the comics that had come before me, because Lee Gallagher made some great stuff, and I thought I would just sort of match what they were doing. And DC very matter-of-factly said, please don't. We know that you can draw in this kind of more expressive, gritty stuff like the Batman they see behind me, and they say, do that. I made this piece. I thought they were crazy. Not that it was a bad idea, but it was such a departure from what they'd already had. It seemed like there was no way they were going to, really want this, but they talked Lego into it. Lego got excited by the new approach. DC was happy to keep the client. I was happy to have the job, but it was my first big job in comic books. So there were a lot of people doing things they hadn't done before, or taking risks they hadn't done before. And I'll tell you, it's one of the things I'm most proud of about the BIONICLE book, is that it would have been really easy to just make more comics like they'd been before. There was nothing wrong with the comics books that came before me, but I wasn't really looking forward to the idea of just coming doing what someone else had already done. The fact they gave me so much freedom and they were willing to try something new, I think it took some guts. So, Steve, if we have any comments or anything you need for me to address, please let me know. I'm getting some thumbs up, and I like that. I can't see the Twitch feed. We're running this to where I can see the Facebook feed. So, if any good questions. Question from Twitch. Let's see. Do you do BIONICLE commissions? Yeah, I certainly do. The best way to get if you want an original BIONICLE drawing from me, the best way to do it is to come see me at a comic book convention, or a store signing that I do at a comic shop across the country. All such pieces are priced based on the amount of labor and degree of difficulty. I will warn you, I typically charge a little bit more for a BIONICLE piece than I do for, say, like a drawing of Batman or Superman. And it's not, I'm not trying to be unfair to anybody, but the reality is these are difficult to draw. There's a lot of detail here. To get out the reference, draw all these nuts and bolts. Axon, his physiognomy is very different than Vizon and Fenrak, whereas Batman and Superman basically have the same body type. It is easier for me to do that work. They'll both be nice-looking pieces, but if you come see me at the show, I can make it at the show. Otherwise, I would say write me an email and we can work it out privately, but the problem is I'm doing a lot of published pieces for the comic book publisher Dynamite, and so right now I'm trying to balance all the requests I get. So when I'm at home, I work for the publishers. When I'm in person and I can be at comic book shows and meet fans, I'll make pieces for them there. I think there are a few people here. Steve might even have gotten a custom one from me, and there are a few people who have gotten them. I know there's a fan who had me draw, who did they have me draw? Who's the blue Piraka? I drew the blue Piraka just last weekend in Chicago for somebody. I'm happy to do them. I love to do them. So the answer is yes, but it's a little complicated. Question from Twitch. I'm curious how you got into the comic book business before BIONICLE Comic. It's a good question. So I grew up working in a comic book shop. I was 13 years old, and I typed up a little resume. I was a regular shopper there, and I just really wanted to work in the shop. So when you're 13, you don't have a lot of good things to put on a resume. You're awfully young, but I did have a paper route. I had babysat some kids, so I had references. I knew how to touch type, which at the time nobody had a computer, but there were typewriters, so maybe that was valuable. So I turned that in, and the owner of the comic shop, the skills I had weren't very attractive to running a comic book store, but he said, hey, this is a 13-year-old who's trying really hard and is trying to do this seriously. I want to give him a job. So I ended up working there, where I bagged and taped and priced up gold and silver comics. It was the Comic Carnival in Indiana, and they're like family to me still. And it doesn't seem like that would be really valuable for me to draw comics, but it was incredibly valuable. I learned so much about the comic book industry. I got to meet some professional comic book artists when I was young, because we would have them be guests I remember I got to meet the Roger Stern who wrote The Death of Superman, and then I had dinner with him later, and I was, I don't know, 15 years old, 18 years old, something like that. So you get to learn a little bit of how the industry works. And then in college, in high school, I drew for my school newspaper. So when I got out of college, it was time to get a job, and I'll tell you, I didn't really want to do that. That wasn't as much fun as, drawing superheroes and playing Frisbee all day. So before I decided to become an adult, I said, let's try seeing if I can have a career in comic books. So I made the Shiver in the Dark comic book, which I wrote, drew, lettered, colored, published. It actually just had its 20th anniversary, and I had a successful Kickstarter campaign for it. I'm continuing the series now, so there's going to be more of this coming out. But it's the funny thing. I used to be a bit of a Beatles fan when I was younger, and I remember watching a couple documentaries about them, and their career just went up and up and up. And one of the things George Harrison said was, whenever we took our next step, it kind of seemed like we were ready for it. And I never really kind of felt like I set out to be a comic book artist. But if you look back at my life, I worked in a comic shop when I was 13, and then I drew for my high school newspaper, and then I studied journalism in college, and then I knew enough about how to write and draw and work in the print industry to making a comic book wasn't so hard. Everything just seemed a little bit harder than the thing before. There was no big jump. Even when I got the BIONICLE job, while it was my first big job in comics, I had published comics before, so I wasn't completely green. What do we got here? Let's see. Here's a good question. Let's see. Let me back up and read a few of these things. Let's see. I'm reading back some of the previous comments here that I got from other people. Let's see. I'm curious, how did you get into comic books before? Okay. Tony, please come to a comic book convention. I'm happy to talk about this stuff in person and ask any specific questions, and maybe even give some examples, because I'll have some work to show to better answer your questions with here. Let's see. Thanks for the comment, Scott Alberts, about the commission. I'm glad you like it. Do I have a favorite panel I drew from the run? I probably do. I'm trying to think. I can talk about the Vitruvian Man panel, which I think is in issue 11. It's the one that everybody hated from me, but we'll talk about that later in the feed. I think it's not my favorite panel, but maybe my favorite page. I don't think it's the best drawn page, but it's the page that I got excited by, because I sort of like the story of Vizon, when he goes into this cave and he touches this artifact, and he's sort of electrocuted by it, and it's already getting the backstory from him. I really like that one. There's also one where there's the Walmart toy I don't remember his name, but he was an exclusive Walmart toy, where he bounces around all the page, breaking all the panels. I thought that was interesting. When I made my comic book Shiver in the Dark, I was really going through this crazy experimental period where I thought, I'll use every art supply I can. I'll use oil pastel, I'll use photographs, I'll use ink, I'll use watercolor, and that sort of freedom of do whatever seems interesting. As long as it's interesting and exciting, put it on the page. I tried to carry that over onto BIONICLE. So when there were times when I could have some interesting panel layouts. I think there's one issue that has a page where all the characters go through a cave, and I drew it all as like one continuous panel, and you can see everybody marching through the panels, or through the cave, through the entire page. I thought that was an interesting page. So, I mean, the BIONICLE world is kind of rich anyway, but the BIONICLE toys are not the BIONICLE movie, is not the BIONICLE video game, is not the BIONICLE comic book. The best way to make the comic book interesting is to take the best parts of BIONICLE and then take what a comic book does well and sort of push those two together. So I want to be a good comic book artist first, and then if I am assigned BIONICLE, how do I make BIONICLE fit what a comic book is natively best? That's sort of the best way I know to go about that. Gregory, how are you? Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to have more shows on Facebook, by the way. Tonight is specifically about BIONICLE, but we're going to have some other Facebook shows, typically on Thursday. I come on. I can tell you in about 2 weeks, I'm going to have a big live sale this is my big advertisement. I've got some exclusive Deja Thoris comics coming out. They're going to be available only from me and from my website, and I will be offering those here on Facebook here in about 2 weeks. So thanks for having me on for Bionicle, and thanks for tolerating that I gave a little plug. Travis, I think there probably will be a Shiver in the Dark trade paperback at some time. It'll probably be when I get around to adding color to it, but I know there's a second series coming up, and I'm working on that first. So let's see. Daniel Hunt, were there any concepts or story beats in Bionicle that really stuck out to you? How to say, wow, that's really cool, loved your stuff as a kid? Thank you for that. Yeah, there are some that stood out. Greg Farshey wrote Bionicle, and you guys know he is the Bionicle master. I mean, he wrote all of it. I mean, from what I understand, he had to develop the characters, decide everything about their names, colors, personalities. And so my job was to sort of take what he did and figure out a way to make it look cool. I do feel like I was able to add a lot to it, but undeniably, the best way that I can describe our relationship is that, maybe I'm the quarterback, but he's calling the play. I'm only doing what he's telling me to do. I'm trying to figure out a way to make it work, but he's giving me all the bones and pieces and saying, okay, here's the starting point, turn it loose and draw it and make it work as best you can. And there were a few times when I didn't do much to deviate from what he was doing, certainly not how he had paced the panels. When I got a script from him, most of the pacing was worked out. However, I was given the freedom to change things as I saw fit. And one of the ones that by I say change things as I saw fit, I couldn't change what happened, but I could change the pace in which it happened. I could change where the focus was. If somebody had just been punched out or hit and was knocked unconscious or something, and a Toa had beaten a Piraka, the next panel might have the Toa say something very heroic, and I got to decide how those two things interacted. And so I could have it to where I show this person get hurt, and then the next panel I show the Toa, or for the next scene I could show the person still being hurt and sort of rubbing their wounds and the Toa's words coming off the panel. I got to decide which had the most impact. And so the thing I think about that I remember that I liked a lot was when Axon first shows up. Axon's my favorite of the Bionicles. I've not had a secret about that. But he shows up and he sort of knocks around two of the Piraka, and there's a time he introduces himself and he holds the axe up above his head. Initially in the script, I think he's fighting them, and he talks about how he is the defender of the Mask of Life. And there was nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but I thought it was such a good moment that he would announce himself, and I wanted him to have a bigger beat. So I include the scene, it's not in the script, where he's basically vanquished everybody, and then he holds his axe up and makes the declaration of his purpose as a character. So I gave him that extra beat, and it steered, I didn't change what happened, but I steered the focal point away from the Piraka onto Axon. And they let me have that kind of freedom, and that was really, really cool. So that's the sort of thing I got to do as far as moving things around. Samuel asks, can you tell us the story of the concepts, the Vizon and Fenrek? I think that's the question that someone wanted us to ask earlier. They said it was a funny story. Yeah, it is, and I knew I was going to tell this story. So this is one of my favorite stories, and I feel bad if you guys have already heard the story. You can see the smile on my face. It's a good story. So I don't remember, I think it's issue 5. It has the introduction of Vizon and Fenrek. What happened was when I worked on the toy line, Lego, we would talk on the phone sometimes, not that often. Most of my conversation with DC and Logo was in the beginning of the project, when we're sort of finding out what our working relationship is going to be. And I remember very early on they said, do you want to have the Lego toys? I was going to need to have them to draw them. They had to give them to me. And so when I worked on the Lego Bionicle toy line, I got every Bionicle toy for free. That was a nice perk. But they asked me, do you want them built or do you want to have them unbuilt? And initially I said, well, maybe I should build them because I'll know them more intimately. But then I realized if I build them the wrong way, then I draw them the wrong way, and we can't have that. And so Lego quickly agreed, and they said, yeah, we'll send them to you built. So I would get a script of the characters, a script basically telling everything that's going to happen, and then I might get the box of the new toys, and there would be a color code or a little legend telling me who's who. I would get 6 Piraka, and it would have to say that the green one is what's his name? Vizak. Is it Vizak? No, he's I've forgotten them. Who's the green one? I can't remember. Anyway, I'm going to go on with the story. So I would get the characters, and I would line them up and say, read the script, and say, okay, I make sure I have the right toy. I would put a little tie a little string around them with a piece of paper to make sure they were labeled really well. I didn't want to accidentally draw the wrong one, which I did twice. We caught them, and I think we got most of the errors fixed. But what would happen is I'd get these toys, and I would get the script, and I would pull out and make sure I would line everything up. But I get a script, and it has Vizon and Fenrak, and I've not received Vizon and Fenrak toys. They haven't arrived. And so I'm talking with Toby Duckowitz, I think was the art director at Lego at the time, and I was talking to my editor, Jay Gardner, and I say, hey, I can't draw this thing. I don't have the toy. And there's such a chain that everything has to go through. I had to talk to DC. DC had to talk to Lego. And then Lego had to talk to Denmark. Where's the toy? What's it going to look like? And we're running up close to the deadline. And so we work out the solution that draw around the characters. Don't, if I have somebody talking to Vizon and Fenrak, draw Brutaka and leave a space to go and add Vizon and Fenrak in later, which is not a bad solution. But the problem is, if you've played with the Lego Bionicles, they have different sizes, different scales. Some of them aren't all humanoid in construction. And so I had no idea what they were going to look like. So we're up against this incredible deadline. And I've got maybe a day or two to get them done. And I've stayed up all night. I've got everything done. And I've got it's very short. It's like 48 hours that we have to get the thing done to get it printed on time. And I get a call, and I think it's my editor, though it might have been someone from Lego. And they're being very serious. And they said, okay, we're going to get you Vizon and Fenrak. Here's what's going on. There's one Vizon and Fenrak in the world. They've only made one. It's the master. It's the prototype. They are FedExing it from Denmark to me to where I live. It's not going to Lego USA. They're going to cut everybody out. It's not going to DC Comics. It's going directly to me. And I had to go to the airport to pick it up. And before I could do that, I had to sign all these agreements that I wouldn't let anybody see it. I wouldn't talk about it. I wouldn't reveal what it looked like. In fact, I even I talked to, I guess it must have been Lego USA, because I said, well, what's it look like? And they just told me point blank, they don't know. They have no idea. So, but they told me where to go to the airport. I have to drive out there, have to sign for it, bring my ID. So I get this box, and I got to race home and draw it. Don't even know what it looks like. So I've been up all night, and I decided I'm going to give myself a little break. So I stop at this restaurant that serves really wonderful brunch, nice fresh squeezed orange juice. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to take an hour out. I'm going to have this breakfast. And while I'm there, there's this table not too far from me, and there are 4 people sitting there. There are 2 mothers and 2 children, and the children look like they're about 8 and 10 years old. And the food is done, and the two adults are talking, and these kids are bored out of their mind. They just want to go home or play or do something, but they have to sit still at the table. And I looked over, and there's the box. This isn't the box, but I was going to use this to put my camera on in a moment. There's a box with Vizon and Fenrak in it, and I thought, oh, what? Maybe these kids might like to see it. So I put the box on the table. I don't look at them. I don't talk to them. I don't say anything, but I can sort of see how bored they are. And I put it on the table, and I happen to have a little box cutter, or the knife or whatever, the jelly knife, and I cut it open, and I open the box. And there it is, very carefully packed. There's Vizon and Fenrak sitting in there, and I don't know how they kept it together. They packed it incredibly well. They're standing on top of each other as they're supposed to be. I don't have to build it. I don't have to do anything. So I open it up, and I see the cloth cape, which was terribly cool. And it is evident immediately that this might be the coolest of all the Bionicles. and I pull the whole thing up and put it on the table, and it just sort of set it there, and it's standing there in all its glory. And I'm trying not to look at the two kids, but my eyes are going over, hoping they'll see it. And one of them sees it and turns on, like just wakes up, and he's like, hey, look, look, look. And they're both checking it out and preening, and I'm trying to act like I'm just posing it and doing everything. They're not supposed to see this at all. Lego, I promise you, no one had a cell phone camera. This thing was not going to leak. I was just trying to be nice to two little kids. I know I technically broke the rules, but it wasn't that bad. And so what happened was they got a chance to look at it. They didn't get within 10 feet of it, but they got to see it just for a second. And I picked it up and I put it right back in the box. And I said to them, it's not even in the stores yet. And I put it in and I boxed it up and put it away. And my food came and I ate, and that was it. And I laugh because I know those kids, I could tell they knew what a Bionicle was. They knew they'd never seen it. They knew it was brand new. And when I told them it's not even in the stores yet, I know they heard me, but I don't know if they believe me, because in my head, I'm hoping they said, Mom, you got to take me to the store. I got to get that. And they weren't going to find it because it didn't come out for about 4 or 5 months. And I can only think that they went to school telling their kids, yes, I'm telling you, there's this thing. It's this giant spider. It exists. And they said, no, it doesn't. And then it finally came out. I remember being 10 years old. I remember these conversations. I remember what it was like. And it was awfully fun for me to play along. So it was one of my favorite moments of doing the book. I ate the breakfast. I went back home. I stayed up. It was certainly like a 24-hour, 30-hour period where I just got the pages done, and we just got under the deadline and the book came out. It was really great. Let's see. What are some other good questions here? Can you tell us the story of concepts? Okay, I just read that one. Let's see. Also, chat would like to inform you that it was Umbra you were referring to. Yeah, Umbra, yes, you're exactly right. I feel so bad I can't remember all these names, but they are coming back to me. Gustavo, how are you? It's so nice to see you. We haven't talked in so terribly long. I hope you're doing well. Oh, so you're going back and forth between the Addams family. Well, that makes sense. Gustavo was referring to Neil Adams, an artist that he and I both admire, who unfortunately passed away here recently. Let's see, comment from Twitch. Everybody loved the Vitruvian Man panel. It's one of my favorites too. Main complaints were, from what I heard, the Mask of Life's design itself being fairly simple, but I find it cute, laugh out loud. That is reasonable. I heard a lot of people hated the Vitruvian Man panel. For those who don't know, this is when Motoro puts on the Mask of Life, and I was reading the script, and he was supposed to have, for those who don't know, he was supposed to have this sort of mind-expanding experience. And I thought, you know, the Bionicles are living, but they look so robotic. And I wanted them to be more living if you put on the Mask of Life. And so I thought about the Da Vinci drawing, where Leonardo da Vinci draws a man kind of like a machine. He sort of dissects the function of it. And I thought it'd be really cool to draw Motoro in the same pose. It would be kind of like, if Da Vinci says man can be represented more like a machine, then I could say machines represented more like a man. It was very stiff, but that's how Da Vinci made it, so that's how I made it. And I know that there were some fans who didn't catch the reference, and frankly, if you're 6 years old, I don't know why you would. This was me being really high-minded. Some people got it, some people didn't, some people loved it, some people hated it. But it did what I always say is a mark of good art. It made everybody have a response. People remember it. It struck a chord, and that's what I was looking for. Yes, Zactan is the leader, the green Piraka. So thanks for that. Thanks for the editor work there, Steve. Anyway, but that was the sort of thing about working on Bionicle. They were cool enough to let me put stuff like that in there. I can't speak for the sensation and interaction that Gallagher did. The other artists who worked on this, I'm trying to remember who were there were two. Lee Gallagher and, is it Lee Gallagher? I keep wanting to say Lee Brackett, but that's the person who wrote The Empire Strikes Back. There were some artists who came before me, and I just don't think there's any way they had quite the freedom that I did. I've said several times, I am both the most loved Bionicle artist and the most hated Bionicle artist. But I'm proud of that title, because what I didn't want to be was the guy in the middle that was just kind of, he's okay. I think it's far better to try to make really exciting work that some people really love, even if some people don't get it. Yeah. Bizak is the blue one. Okay. Yeah, Sedenbach, you had heard the story. It's a good one. Let's see if I got some other good comments. I'm scrolling through here. Let's see. Have you had to fend off assassins Lego sends to take you out of breaking your NDA? Not yet. Now, I don't know. You know, there were some things that I haven't talked about that I just felt like I shouldn't. Um, you know, there were... Bionicle was so big. That was the thing that I had a hard time sort of wrapping my mind around. They told me that it was translated to something like 9 total languages and had a worldwide circulation of around, 31.5 million. I remember they told me that one time, and it just blew my brain. I received fan letters from people who I I don't know if they knew any English at all. I remember I would occasionally get an email from someone from China, and typically if I get an email from China, it's spam. But not when I was working on Bionicle. There were people who read this who really liked it, and that was really, really exciting. I know that there were a few things that Lego talked about maybe doing at one time. There was talk that they were going to fly me out to Denmark and I was going to meet the creators, and that ended up not happening. I didn't know that my face was going to run in issue 0, where they announced me as the new artist. They had me take several photos. I thought they were for the website or something. I didn't know that was going to be in paper. So I was very fortunate to get to be a part of this. I was also very fortunate that they gave me so much freedom. I knew while I was working on Bionicle that it was going to be important. And I remembered being a fan of the Micronauts, which was a toy line that was somewhat similar to to Bionicle. They were interchangeable robotic kind of toys. And when I got the Bionicle job, I was an adult, but I remembered what it was like to be a kid playing with something that was somewhat similar to this. And to me, that felt like I had a responsibility. You only get to be a kid once. And I knew there was a gentleman named Michael Golden who drew the Bionicle comic book when I was little. And it occurred to me that the way I looked at him was how kids were going to look at me. And so I tracked him down at a comic book convention when I got the Bionicle job. And it was like, help me, Obi-Wan, teach me the ways of the Force. And I asked him about what it meant to draw Micronauts and what the responsibility was and what that would mean for the rest of my life. And he gave me some great advice. And he said, you need to learn to figure out a way to love this. Not like it, love it. Because it's going to be a part of your life the rest of the way. And I really thought that was great advice, so I try to internalize that. And so honestly, when I get asked to be on something like this, if I can say yes, I do. Because I know what it's like to be a fan. And I know that you guys have got questions, and I'm the only guy who can have the answers sometimes. And if I don't remember, it means it's lost to history. So let's get some of this recorded. Let's get some of these stories out while they're still relatively fresh in my mind. Let's see, what are some other good comments here if I've overlooked some. Let's see. You made a lot of custom mask designs in your comics for Bionicle that have cemented themselves in the Bionicle canon. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Did Lego give you a lot of freedom making these background characters? Yeah, they did. More than I thought. So I remember there was one time there was a mask on one of them, and it wasn't intentional, but I get it. There was one that just sort of looked a little too much like Batman. And it really didn't look that much like Batman, but he had posts that came up off of his ears, and he did have like an angular design on his chest. And they said, you should change that. And the funny thing is, when I was designing them, how can I put this? A lot of the Legos have a lot of this, a lot of the Bionicles have a lot of the same pieces that get used over and over. And very often it's the head, particularly on a small Toa, that's different. And so, but they still have a lot of common shapes. Like a lot of them have circular mouths, or they have eyes that are rectangles or triangles. And so becomes this rhythm when you design these, that you think about what are some of the proportions and shapes they might have. And then if you want someone to really sort of feel different, you can just have 1 or 2 pieces on the head really stand out, or be really pronounced, or be of a different rhythm. And so these 2 posts that come out and point off of his head, which were like Batman, were something that the other Bionicles didn't have. So that was a way I could make one that looked different. But in that case, it looked like something else, and we had to alter it. I think that
I think it's one of the things that sort of I shouldn't overlook when I talk about drawing the Bionicles. I did it for 2 years. I wasn't given a huge number of characters to draw, but there were some. You know, you got 6 Toas, you got 6 Piraka, you got the Matoran. There were some special size figures like these guys, Axon and Fenrak, or Axon and Brutaka. And so when you have them all in front of you and you realize there are a couple pieces that are reused and they have some certain rhythm to what they look like, when you internalize that and you're asked to make one up, if you do it right, you can make one up that looks like it should belong. And I'll bet you guys have pored over these other characters that I've created, and some of you say, yeah, that one looks great, and others you say, yeah, that one looks really weird. And that's the thing that I'm guilty of, where I say I want some to look like they fit really well, and then some, if they're a little bit odd, that means they have more character. It means you can do more with it. I know a few people have tried to make custom masks and make the characters the ones I created, and I will tell you, that is incredibly flattering. A couple people have brought me some of these to show at comic book conventions, and it means a lot. It's really, really nice. Let's see. Let's see. Steve says, to clarify, I put a pause on the questions for a bit to help you get established on the art at your pace. If you want more questions, please ask. Oh yeah, we're doing well. Carlos Deanna and Randy Elliott, and I believe Lee was after me. Okay, Steve, this is awesome. Steve, you're helping a ton here. Let's see, Mr. Sayger, do you see the past Lego Ideas entry by Sakota? The Legends of the Bionicle. One of the Tabulous is a terrific tribute to the full-page drawing you did of Motoro's sacrifice with the faces of the past selves behind him. I did not see that. If you want to send me a link to that or write me an email, I would love that. Yeah, if you go to stuartsayger.com, here's the address behind me here, and it's also in the corner on my screen. There's a contact button, and I would love to see that. Send that to me. That'd be really, really cool. Let's see. Can you follow with photos? Oh, it looks like I'm getting some photos sent to me here. Okay, cool. So I can check this out. Hi, Sarah. How are you? I'm going to see Sarah next week in Seattle. If you guys make it to Seattle and you want to talk to me in person, I'll be at the Emerald City Comic Con. That'll be great. How would you guys like to see some cool stuff from the archives? I'm telling stories. We're going to get to the drawing here soon. Let me pull out some stuff. I always have stuff that I pull out just a little each time I do this so I can tease you guys with some stuff. So how about this? Here is from, I think I've already shown this, so we'll start with this because this isn't as exciting as some other things. I have here, which Bionicle is this? This is the Rakshi. If you guys remember this, this is the brown one. This is the very first Bionicle I ever drew. This is the one that Lego and DC sent me. This is the very first test piece I made. In fact, if I remember right, this is one they didn't even ask for. Let's see how this appears on my screen here. I have to jump around a little bit. That looks pretty good. Let's do that. So this, they sent me that toy, and I think this is the very first one I ever made. And if I recall, I made this without them even asking for it. This is how I got used to the characters, how I figured out I was going to approach them. You know, how loose could I get? How painterly could I get? How defined where the background's going to be? This is it. This is the first one. And I wish I had a date on this, but one of the things that's fascinating about this is if you look closely at the artboard, it has information printed on it, and it says DC Comics and such. By contract, I had to draw all of the Bionicle art on DC paper. I couldn't use my own. And one of the things that's interesting about it is here is a page from issue 5, number 2, and it's also on DC paper, but I drew it on the back. And the reason for that is the DC paper has blue lines on it, as you can see here. But because I drew in grayscale, sometimes it was hard to scan this art and not have the blue lines go away. So what I did was I would always draw on the back of the DC board. So this is the DC board.
if you can see it, and I drew on the back, this is Bionicle 5, page 2. And it looks here, I tried to really, because I said I took the stuff seriously, I tried to make notes on all this. You can see I wrote on there, I penciled it on September 10th, 2006. And this is what's really cool. I made a point of Xeroxing the pencils before I inked it. So these are how I made these pages. You can also see I actually drew edge to edge. I drew a little bit larger than I was supposed to, and I had to do some digital work to resize these. But because I really wanted to draw the pages larger so that I could get more detail in, but by contract it had to be on DC board. So that was a way I could draw it as big as I possibly could and then digitally shrink it a little. But you can compare and contrast. A lot of the lighting is already solved here. And then it gets a little bit more thoroughly established here in the inks. But then every once in a while I change some things. So look at this top panel here. You can see how the figures are represented. Clearly at some point I changed my mind completely and redid it here. So this is a snapshot of production, almost like a little artifact. I will show you this. I don't know if I've shown this before. This is a layout I did for the cover of Bionicle number 5, which introduces Vizon and Fenrak. This is dated September 29th, 2006. And this tells me that this would have been right about the time that Vizon and Fenrak came in the mail, and I was up against my deadline. This must have been a piece that I made the day after I came home from having breakfast and showing the kids the toys. This was a layout. This is one that I proposed for the cover. Because the character was new, I wanted him mostly in shadow with a little bit of grazing light to reveal the two. I didn't want to give too much away. This was not used, but I think it's a really interesting concept. So I should pull back a little bit. I hope you can see it all there. But I don't think anyone's ever shown that. I don't think it's ever been published. So you tune in, you get to see the cool bonus stuff. How's that? I'm going back. Do we have any good comments here for this stuff? Let's see. Let's go back to the questions here. Let's see. Do you have any drawings? Let's see. Glatorian. I don't think I have any drawings of him, but Thomas, if you write me an email, we might be able to work out a way where I can see you at a convention, talk about getting a commission, because these things are fun to draw. And there have been a couple that I've drawn for people that were either after or before I worked on the set. I've tried to get scans of most all of them. A couple of these, it's painted, but I don't have the originals of them anymore. They're out there in the world. Let's see. Missed you at E2 last week. I was hoping to be there. Hey, you got more chances. I don't live too far from Chicago, so we'll be able to do that again. Let's see, what else do I have to show? I will show you this. This is pretty cool. This is a little off subject, but I think you'll be amused by this. So these days, here's some of the comic books I've worked on more recently. I got to do some variant covers for the Transformers, which while they're not Bionicle, you can see echoes of how I drew the Bionicles coming through and how I made these Transformers covers. I know a lot of people are interested in one or interested in the other, and I honestly think that it was because of the work I did in Bionicle that the comic shop I teamed up with to make these Transformers comics thought I would be a good fit for Transformers. It's interesting, these toys aren't too dissimilar, and I really feel like I learned a lot drawing Bionicle that made it easier to draw Transformers. As you see behind me are some of my pop-up banners. Recently I did some Joker covers for DC Comics. These are some of the things I've done. Of late, right now, a series I'm working on is this one here, which is Army of Darkness versus the Reanimator. And what's kind of cool about this book is this is Ash Williams, Bruce Campbell, the actor here. I drew a cover for one of the issues. I think it's issue 3 or 4, which is coming out really soon. And I got to do a lot of machinery for it. So this is the original art. If I could have drawn Bionicle this big, I probably would have. I wasn't allowed to by contract. But if you look at this, you can see I had to draw a lot of machinery in here, and a lot of it is really dark and dramatic. And so a lot of the techniques that were used on this cover were really kind of developed and polished when I was doing Lego Bionicle. Because Lego Bionicle was my first big comic book series, you know, I was cutting my teeth. I was learning who I was as an artist on those. Let's see, somebody write, are those Transformers comics by Jamie Roberts? Let's see, is he the writer? It's written by somebody named Furman, and the other creators are Goody and Bove, so that's probably the penciler and inker. What's cool about these, though, too, is they connect. Yeah. Again, when I have enough time and I've got a good idea, I try to put it all together. I will tell you this, also relates to Bionicle and me having this journey of being the a guy who got to draw comics for a generation of toy lovers. I was fortunate enough that I grew up with Micronauts. That's what I was a fan of. I told that story earlier. I got to draw a Micronauts cover. So for you guys who are Bionicle fans who grew up drawing Bionicle as a kid, if Bionicle ever returns, hopefully one of you gets to draw Bionicle, just like I grew up with Micronauts and got to draw my Micronauts as an adult. That was a good feeling. Let's see. What else do we have here? Let's see. What I also found interesting is I was watching DC event where they did interview with someone. I saw one of your Hal Jordan prints on the wall. Yeah, you did. That was the guy from Friday Night Lights. That was Scott Porter. So I used to see Scott Porter at comic book conventions from time to time. He would do signings for Friday Night Lights, and I was doing I guess probably Bionicle about the time. But after the show was over, I remember we hung out a few times. I played foosball with him, and he was a fan of Green Lantern that I had drawn, and he wanted his own Green Lantern and Green Arrow, so I drew those for him. It is a small world. Let's see. Who else we got here? If you like, listen, by the way, if you're like those Transformers comics, they're available on my website, as well are some signed Bionicle comics as well. Anyway, what else do I have that I can show you that would be fun? I will say this. This, again, isn't exactly related to Bionicle, but it's close, and I think you'll get a kick out of it, because I was drawing so much metal, so much machinery and such on the Bionicles that, as I said, it's sort of, I learned how I wanted to draw those materials. So recently I did a bunch of Dr. Dooms, and these aren't Bionicles, but a lot of the techniques had to be used. Check out the lighting on these pieces. Sometimes I get in a mood where I will draw the same subject several times and try different techniques. It's if you use the same subject again and again and again, it sort of serves as a baseline. But I saved these because they really reminded me from when I was having to draw those dark, dramatic Bionicles. So I hope you enjoyed looking at those. This is what it means to be a comic book artist. You know, the Bionicle job was one that I completed a few years or several years ago now, but there are echoes of it, and it helped contribute to who I am now. Reminds me, yes, I did the lighting piece. So here's the bad news, you guys. I have to tell you, I couldn't find my Brutaka. I told everybody I was going to draw Brutaka tonight, and I can't find my Brutaka, and it's driving me crazy. So I don't have the Brutaka model to draw tonight, so I may end up having to do another Axon. I promise you I will draw Brutaka in the future. If I draw Axon tonight, I'm telling you it's going to look good. I just can't draw the Brutaka because I just couldn't put my hands on it. I moved not too long ago, and I saved all this stuff, but I boxed it up. So please forgive me for that. Anyway, I do have another camera here. We're going to set it up, and we're going to have a different approach for how I draw. So we're going to have a camera that's going to be able to project downwards, and you're going to be able to see my actual drawing surface and not so much my face, if I can do this correctly. In the meantime, do I have any other questions that I can ask, or I answer, that you have to ask? Please dig in and ask. I want this to be fun and entertaining, and I'm really, like I said, I'm really flattered you guys want me to come on and talk about this. I really hope that as with always, I hope that Lego will bring back more Bionicles. I would love to draw them again for Lego or for anybody if somebody has the rights to the toy line. I know that Paper Cuts made some Bionicle comics after DC did, so there can be more. Oh, I wanted to show you this. this is one of the things that's really, really cool about my personal Bionicle experience. As I told you, I would occasionally get letters from fans. What I didn't expect was when I went to comic book conventions, sometimes I would meet young fans. So I had mentioned that Axon was my favorite Bionicle. So I had a fan, Logan, made this for me, and he was very little, but this is a lanyard, and he made what he called an Axon necklace, and he gave this to me. I'm telling you guys, this is really, really cool, because Logan was very little. It was evident that he'd worked very, very hard on this, and it means a lot to me. I keep this stuff. So Logan, if you're watching, I want you to know all these years later, I still have it, and I love it. So thank you. Let's see. I kept everything as far as, do I still have the Vizon and Fenrek prototype? I kept everything that I possibly could. There were some things that I wasn't able to keep, but I kept absolutely as much as possible because honestly, I knew people were going to care, and it meant a lot to me as well. It was a job that I liked, and I was really excited when I got it, and I told myself it won't last for forever. You know, I knew there would be a time that I was either drawing something else, and that's why I wanted to keep all of it. Let's see, somebody should give me a life-size Axon mask. I would love that. Somebody, I have a photo of it. Somebody came to me at San Diego this last year. I need to post it on my Facebook page. I'll do it. Somebody came to my table at San Diego, and they had built a life-size Piraka mask, and I got a photo of myself holding it. So I'll post that on Facebook in the next day or so, and I'll put it on Instagram too. Let's see. Question, what advice tip would you have aspiring artists specifically for drawing Bionicle? All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is the sort of thing I can talk about way too much. But depending on your age and your skill set, I would always say to really get good at drawing, it's really important that you make sure it stays fun and interesting for you. You need it to stay a challenge, but you need it to stay fun. I know a lot of people who, I know one guy who got really good at baseball and played it all the time and was very close to being able to play professional baseball. In fact, he tried out for a triple league team, and they said that what he really needed to do was lift weights and do specific exercises that would make his running faster. And I could tell like that was work he didn't want to do. He was more than happy to go out there and bat all day and run and field and do whatever, but go to the gym and do very specific stretching and weightlifting, that's not fun. And he wasn't willing to do that. And so I think you should ask yourself, you know, how much are you willing to do that isn't necessarily fun but will make you better? And don't pollute, don't turn it into work so much that it's not fun anymore. I always say draw things you're not good at drawing. You know, if you really want to draw Batman and get better at drawing Batman, yeah, you work on drawing Batman, but you need to be a well-rounded artist. If you want to draw superhero comics or Bionicles, and you want to do so professionally, like at a really high level, high skill set, the best thing you can do is draw a horse, draw trees, work in different art styles, and really build up all of your skills. When you come back to drawing a Bionicle or drawing Batman, having those wider skill sets will be there for you to draw from, and it'll make all of your pieces better. That's the obvious answer, but more specifically, I would say, you know, if you want to draw the Bionicles or draw Batman or draw anything better, before you put pencil to paper, figure out what it is what you want to say about it. And I really mean that. Not necessarily in terms of a story, but what is the thing to you? So before I drew the Bionicles, period, I sort of sat down and I tried to connect them emotionally. What were they going to be? And the thing that was my barrier was that I'm, for the most part, never considered myself someone who's really interested in robotics. Okay, I was always drawn to people, living characters. You know, I needed to figure out a way for these things to be as lifelike to me as possible and get past the fact that they were hard surfaces. I'm not saying they're not cool. I'm not saying there's not a lot to work with, but my starting point from what I was interested in was a bigger distance from the Bionicles than, say, it would be from like Batman. Okay, so my way to connect with them was how to figure out how to make them most living, most lifelike, most engaging in ways that I was interested in them. And so I said, well, then what are the things that make a human being a different living different living entity than, say, a robot. And I thought, well, people can, get injured. They can break their arms. And if you break your arm, you have to set a cast. And it can heal, but there's a consequence. And so I started thinking that if the Bionicles fought, maybe they could get bent. They could actually have things break, but they could get put back together. And if they fight outside, they could get wet and dirty and muddy, anything to sort of keep them from living in this little, manufactured vacuum. And then I could do things like, and I asked Lego if this was okay, and they let me do it, and I was so excited. I wanted them to be able to move and have body language that mirrored what humans would do, because when we communicate with each other, we get so much from our body language. As you can see, I talk with my hands all the time. Bionicles, very few of them have hands. Axon does, but he's one of the very, very few. Well, that means that getting these characters to emote and communicate attitude was harder to do, because I couldn't, there's a difference between me drawing a panel and there's a difference between drawing a panel of me saying, aha, and saying, aha, and I couldn't have the Bionicles do that with their hands, so I had to figure out more ways to bring them to life. And so I asked Lego, can I bend them a little bit? If somebody's fighting and somebody's stalking somebody, I wanted them to be able to crouch down a little bit more like a tiger. So I would make their spines bend more like our spines bend. You look at the cover of Lego Bionicle #1. That Piraka's back is bending in a way that the toy just won't bend. And in fact, the spines that come off the back of his head, I drew them so they actually duck behind his back arm in a way that the toy won't do that. But I did that because we get more visual information about the attitude of the character from his arm than we do from his spikes. Why? Because we're used to reading body languages of people who have arms. We don't have spikes. So there were little sheets like that. How much information can we communicate? How much can I bring them to life was really important to me. Let's see. How do I work on drawing hands? Asking for a friend. Zane, I'm going to answer that, but you should turn in on another live feed and we can talk about drawing hands, because I do it all day long. By the way, thanks for these thumbs up. I'm seeing your responses, and it means a lot to me. We'll talk about hands later, because first of all, the Bionicles just about don't have hands. Though I will tell you, there was one issue, and I remember talking to Farshti about this, where I think it's Hakan, and I don't remember who the other Piraka he's with, but the text says that one of them uses his powers and sort of moves these rocks, and they're elevated out of the ground like a hand lifts them up. It's just kind of like that. And I said, well, what's his hand going to look like? Because as near as I can tell, there aren't any hands in the Bionicle universe. And I really found this to be a really troubling point, because I said, if I draw it as a human hand, that communicates that these Bionicles have seen a human hand, or at least they've imagined it. I mean, that puts their world somehow in our world in a way that I don't think we've ever had before. And I actually found that really kind of troubling. I just kind of felt like we shouldn't do that. And I asked him, do you want me to draw a sort of robotic hand? And I think if my memory serves correctly, and I might have it wrong, I think the attitude I was given was just draw a human hand, because the kids will know how to read it. By read it, I mean understand what it is. And that never really sat right with me exactly. But here's the thing. I am hired to draw the thing. I am brought along for my ideas and how I think the thing will work best. But I am not the boss. Very often I would say, hey, I think this should be done this way. Like I said, I moved the panel with Axon. And when I suggest things like that, very often they say, yeah, that's a great idea. Go ahead and do it. But not every time. And that was an instance where I kind of felt like, maybe instead of a hand, we should have a plateau. You can just have rocks come up. It could be like a geyser, and they could be on a slab of rock, and the geyser is blowing and it's holding them up. That's the sort of thing we've already seen in the Bionicle universe. That wouldn't be adding a new element. But the Lego people didn't feel that way. They thought that it was important for the hand to read as a hand, and if the physiognomy was more like a human hand, it didn't matter. And I just said, cool, you guys are the bosses. I'm here to make the comic you want and to make it the best the best way I know how to. I've suggested my idea. You listened to me. We discussed it, and a decision was made. And so I drew it the way they wanted it. A question I forgot to paste here, but I'll re-ask. What was it like working alongside Greg? So I didn't work with Greg alongside that much. Greg did his scripts. Everything was very big and there were a lot of people involved. The way I understood things work, Greg wrote his scripts, and they may have been given to Toby Dutkowitz, who was, I think, a creative director at Lego, and I think he gave them to the people at DC, who then gave them to me. And I was technically hired by DC Comic Books. I worked for them. DC worked for Lego. That's how the comic book was made. So if Lego wanted something done, they didn't talk directly to me. They communicated to DC, and DC brought it to me. And so only very rarely did I have much direct interaction with Greg Farshtey. There were times where we would have like a 6 or 7 person conference call where Lego was involved, DC was involved, I was involved, and we worked some things out. We got all of our heads together. But for the most part, he had a vision, and he would create the vision, and then it would come to me. And if I saw something I thought was odd, I could usually, or wanted to change something, not odd, but maybe I didn't understand it, I would write Lego, they would communicate to DC, and I'd get an answer, and we would just move on from there. Only when it was really convoluted was it necessary to bring everybody in. Now, I say that, but then I was very fortunate because 2 years in a row at the San Diego Comic-Con, Lego had a big booth there, and I got to interact with Greg in person. In fact, the first year I was there, they took the poster that I made of Hakan, and they made a giant, like 2-story statue of him. And there's a photo of me leaning against the statue based on my drawing of Hakan, which is really, really cool. But they'd arranged it where Greg and I did signings on Saturday. And there are just a few photos of it where he and I are side by side. And we did get to talk a little bit, and so what are we doing for the next issue? Or, how's the story coming along? Hey, what did you think of how I drew, Piraka or something? He was very supportive. And I actually felt that he had a harder job than I did. I was given a lot of freedom. He decided what it was I had to draw, but, he had several years of Lego history, BIONICLE history, that he had to stay true to, and I didn't. He had to figure out what the Legos were going to do. I had to sort of visualize it and come out with a dynamic way to do it. And while I did get to invent some background characters, things like that, I really felt he had a lot more to keep track of. I always kind of felt like my job was to take what he had envisioned and already had going on, and my job was to make it look cool. He was nice to me. We got along well. But it was pretty evident that he had a lot more to worry about than I did. No, Ailey is not here today. Ailey has her own job and she's working. So anyway, I'm going to... wait a minute. To be fair, they did have human hands in the movies to make them more expressive, though apparently that was a controversial decision internally too, but it had a lot of fans like it. I always wish the Bionicles had a little bit more hands. I mean, I like the tools. For those who know me, my favorite things to draw are heads and hands because you can really get expressive with them. But I learned a lot about how to communicate mood and attitude through Bionicle because I didn't have the hands to lean on. I had to find other ways to have them be expressive. So, let's see. How about this? I think it's about time I do some drawing. What do you guys say? So you're going to love this. I hope you do. This is what's fun. I said by contract I had to draw the Lego Bionicles on DC paper, and I have some of their paper left over. So to make this as authentic as I can, this is an unused page of the DC paper from 15, 16, 17 years ago. And just like I did then, I'm going to do now, I'm going to draw on the back. Now, here's what's interesting. It's really good paper, but it's different paper than I work on now, so it's got more texture. And in fact, in some ways, because it has more texture, it means the drawing is going to look a little bit different than what I normally do these days. So I'm setting up my camera here so I can get high enough that we can get a good view. And I'm going to try to draw like that. and I'm going to change my screen setting, and I want you guys to tell me whether or not this works, okay? So it may take me a second to get this set up. How's that? Let's see what we can do here. I'm going to try to add something here just for fun. I've never really done this. Let's see. Video capture device. Ready? I hope you guys dig on this. I'm trying to do something I've never done before. Look at that. I think I'm going to be able to have my head up here so you can see me here too. Put that over there. Bring that down there. That's not bad. You guys will be able to see me a little bit while I draw. High tech, isn't it? Lock the preview. Okay, so now I'm going back to my view here. Let's see. Like you knew what you were doing. Yeah, thank you so much. I like that. I'm going back to Facebook right now and reading some of the comments that I've missed. So if I'm blabbering for just a moment, please apologize. Or I apologize. Please accept my apology. Let's see, a question I forgot to paste here. Okay, what was like working with Greg? I did that. To be fair, they have a lot of human. Yes, I read that. Let's see. Sarah, he told me how you want to start and how... He told me to know how you want to start and know how you want to end and let it flow. He didn't like those charts we all learned in school because it limits what you can write. Oh, Sarah, you talked with Greg Farshey. That makes sense. I understand your comment now. I had some interaction with Greg not too long ago. I really want to sit down and sort of reflect with him and sort of say, hey, let's talk about what it made to crank this thing out. You know, he was full-time at Lego. He was working on Bionicle things that weren't comics. So he had a lot to do. I got to focus on this one job. All right, so we're going to do an axon here. You're going to see all the techniques. I'm going to change my lighting. It's going to get really, really bright here. Let's see if it's too bright. It's kind of bright. Let's see if that'll work. Maybe this will be better. I don't want to glare on the camera, but I want a lot of light on my drawing surface. We'll try this. It's not ideal, but bear with me. Thanks for your patience. I'm trying to give you something custom that you like. So let's see. I think last time I drew axon, I did sort of a 3/4 view. So how about sort of a good straight-on view? And I might cheat because, like, I'm going to have axon kind of running towards us. His head won't move forward quite as much as I'd like it to. So I'm going to go ahead and draw it right out of the gate in a position that it otherwise normally couldn't really do. But oh man, this paper is so rough too. So this is a thing when you work on comics. Typically, comics are drawn on either smooth paper or vellum. Vellum means it has sort of a pebbled finish, and it's actually a reference to back when people used to draw on animal skin before there was paper. I'm talking hundreds of years ago. Let's see, there's an eraser. I'm going to start off doing this thing. This is how I think I make my best pieces. Because axon is more or less humanoid in proportions and figures, I'm going to start off with sort of a pose of a human that I would like, and I'm going to turn it into axon after the fact. So this is his axe, and I like to work pretty quick and loose. I hope there's not... Yeah, you guys can see some of my work here. I didn't want it to be so so light that you can't make anything out. He's got his fin. Oh, here's what's great about drawing the Bionicles. So if I'm working on just the head, I can take it off. Isn't that nice? Let's make it bigger because his head is so cool. And it's not quite a spear, but it's close. He's got that big fin.
Now, I usually start off pretty loose and light like this. I'll tighten this up as we move along. Also, I'm happy to talk while I do this, but I probably can't check the questions as often as I'd like. So I know sometimes artists are just quiet and they keep their head down and draw. That's boring. That's like watching paint dry. You want me to still be able to talk and answer questions. So don't feel as though you can't ask. Okay, so there's a good start of his head. And see how it's pretty loose? Honestly, this is about all the further I go. I will come in with ink before too terribly long, and I'll tighten a lot of the rest of this up in the ink stage. Let's see, he's got an arm that comes forward here. Now I'm already cheating on the physiognomy, so I'm going to draw Axon's arm so it's coming forward, and it can't really come forward more than that. It can when I draw it, though, because I get to cheat. I don't know about those. I don't know about Gallagher and Randy Elliott and all those guys, but I can move this stuff around and put it where I want it. Taking the axe off because I want to get a better look at it. I mean, you got to get a really good axe if you're going to draw Axon. Gonna do some very simple little 1-point perspective on that there, just to give it a little bit more depth. Wow, I had to advance my pencil lead that quickly. Why? Because this paper is that rough. It just buffed it all off. It's incredible. You know, if you guys are comic book fans, there's an artist named Adam Hughes who's really wonderful. I mean, just top-rate comic book artist. And he would talk about he would use like a 2B pencil, or excuse me, he drew with a 4B pencil, which is a rather soft pencil, but he lives in the south of the United States, and when it gets humid, he switches to a harder pencil because the humidity gets in the paper, and he makes the paper a little bit more receptive to the graphite. Now that is somebody who's really sensitive to their art supplies. And if you do this stuff long enough, it gets that way. I'm going to check quickly and see if I have any comments I want to address here. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Just another exercise in page organization. Yeah, you got that. Let's see. Senior projects help me in writing. Hi, Gustavo. You guys have got this nice conversation going on. I kind of love this. Let's see. Travis. Let's see. You talked about meeting up with Michael Golden, but did you ever reach out to any of the prior Bionicle artists or check out any of their work? That is a really good question. Yes and no. So DC or Lego specifically told me, it said, like, leave those guys alone. Don't look at the other art. We want you to make your own stuff. And I really took that to heart. I thought, all right, they're looking for a different art style. Don't, like, I made a point of not looking at what the other guys did, at least while I had the job. Now, afterwards, I said, I want to see what they did. And I really could kind of understand how there were some fans who liked me and loved me, because I really did draw differently. It really was notably different. No one was going to confuse me for the other guys. I will tell you this. I went to DC Comic Books, their headquarters. I was doing a comic book convention in New York, and I happened to stop by because I just wanted to meet people. I was working for them, but I hadn't met in person. So I thought, let's shake hands and get some goodwill. And I wanted to be able to read them. I wanted to be able to know them as people. And so they were very, very nice and very, very cool to me. And they asked me just basic questions about the job, and how they said they really liked the sample, and they told me who colored it, the sample that got me the job, like I was just getting started. And I said, they told me how many people they had tried out and whom I had beaten, and I was kind of flabbergasted, because I'll be perfectly honest, An artist who had tried out for this that I think is really, really skilled is Tom Drenberg. And I said, oh, I really like Tom Drenberg's art. I would love to have seen a sample. And they said, oh, well, we'll show it to you. And I was just blown away that they were basically willing to show it to me because I hadn't even started and I had just gotten the job. You know, that was, it was kind of amazing there. I wanted to make his hand larger. And then they showed me the sample and it was awesome. And that was kind of incredible because I felt like, oh my gosh, this is the guy you didn't take. And I mean, I just loved it. I'd always liked his work. And so to see that, it kind of made me say, like, look, you got a lot to live up to. Tom's a really good artist. He made a great sample. I know they liked your sample. The thing is, Tom drew in a very conventional style, very clean, like what they'd already had, and they clearly wanted something different. And I think that it's very possible Tom could have made something that would have been more in line with my style, and maybe he would have had the job, but that's not what he pitched. That's not what he promoted. Sorry, Tom. I remember I talked to him online a little bit about it, and he said, you know, that was the job I really wanted and also one I was really dreading. He was like, it's great work, but he was joking. He wasn't dreading it, but he said, you know, drawing those things every day was going to be like drawing the inside of a car engine. And I thought, yep, that's true. And that's where Golden's advice was so helpful. You know, figure out a way to love it. I knew that there were, everybody has things they like to draw. Well, figure out a way to like this. The work will be better. You know, here's the thing. I'm done with the Lego Bionicle job. You know, this is not something I'm being paid for right now. If I don't want to do this, I don't do this. But I wanted to do this. I was asked to do this, and I like the community. And it's kind of a nice little stroll down memory lane for me. Would I draw them all again? Yeah, I would. I think I could probably. It would be interesting to see what it would turn into, because I'm sure my style's different. My approach is the same, but your tastes always change. I always feel like an artist, and what they draw is a little bit like being a boat in the ocean. You know, you can paddle in one direction, but realistically, the ocean's going to affect you as well, and you may end up going in a particular direction, but you'll probably be taken someplace different than where you expected. Okay. So I will tell you too, as far as my approach for drawing these things, one of the things that's really important here on Axon is, this might surprise you, is on the back he's got this hose and this post. That is a really important thing for the way that I like to go about thinking about drawing these characters, because that is behind his head, and it's going to give him a lot of depth. It gives him a lot of like rhythm through his body back here. It's a great visual device. Also, I want parts of this to come forward and parts of it to recede. So I'm not going to draw every bit of detail. Some of this stuff is going to be black and silhouette, and it's going to exist only as like a silhouette to sort of feel like it's receding, and then the more important parts come forward. Let's see. What have we got here? I'm reading some more comments here. Let's see. Sedenbach. I got to go way back. Talked about meeting with Michael Golden. Okay, I'm caught up with that. I have to wonder if DC has stock in some pencil or graphite company. That's the only explanation for the paper that I can come up with. No. See, I know why you think that. And if you work like modern comic book artists where you just want really, really clean lines, yeah, almost all comic book artists, modern artists work on the slick paper. I use the rough paper because I like to work more like it's a painting. It gives you something that's a little bit closer to a canvas. Let's see. Early Bionicle artists had to cheat the most because the figures had so much less articulation compared to the later ones. And I see somebody gave that it's a thumb up, and I believe with that. That's the tricky thing.
you know, the question is, how much was Lego willing to let you cheat? I was given, I know for a fact, by far the most freedom. But absolutely, there's always going to be a little bit of cheating just to make the things work. Less of a question, more of a comment, compliment whenever you get to it. I really enjoyed your stylized work because it fits so well with the themes of the story. In essence, these characters were robots that forgot they were robots and became people. Let's see. What's funny is, yeah, people, I had to hit and see more. And the organic way you drew them while still having the clear mechanical parts was such a good visual way of portraying that core theme. Man, Daniel, you summed it up. That's exactly how I think about these things, and I'm very flattered that that comes through. Some of the more recent toys that are Bionicle-like are weaponizers, modulators, and fossilizers from Transformers, especially War of Cybertron. Seth and Bach, you are always talking about Transformers in a way that is above my head. I'm sorry I can't keep up on all this, but I should have seen that coming. Let's see. Gustavo says, ever use a 2H secretary pencil like Neil? Yeah, it's just a 2 hard. The H means hard. And I usually don't work much harder or softer than 2H or softer than 2B. Where does Adam Hughes live? Seta asks. I think it's in Atlanta. Let's see, I'm going through some more questions here. Someone from the Twitch chat wanted us to forward this art for you to see. I am going to look at that, and I just can't do it right now. Steve, thank you. I promise I'll go back and look at it later, but I'm going to get back to drawing this guy. So here's the other thing. You think drawing on rough paper like this is hard on your pencil. It destroys your pens, and I mean that right now. So the brush tip pens and things like that I'm going to draw this with, this paper's rough enough it's going to kill them. I want to say that I don't know if I don't think I got a stipend or anything for art supplies for drawing Bionicle, but boy, if I had, I'd have used them. Let's see, let's get Axon's hand here just right. I'm doing this pretty quickly, but you can sort of figure out how my approach works. I shouldn't have been using that pen because I need a bigger, heavier weight. This paper is just pounding this thing. I'd forgotten how rough this stuff was. I like it, but it is a beast to draw with. And the other thing that is hard for drawing Bionicles for me is I like to really get, and this really is a big deal for me, I like to get lathered up. I like to draw with a lot of spontaneity and just sort of have the rhythm of the piece sort of take over. And I can't really do that with these characters. They're just too demanding. It's coming back to me, though, how I did some of this. It's kind of interesting to feel the muscle memory come in. By the way, this is going to be a nice piece, but you have to understand that I use a lot of paints and inks on top of one another to make sort of alternating opaque layers. What's that mean? Well, it means that I'm only putting on the black layer now. There's going to be white that goes on top of this. This is a brush tip pen I'm using here, and it's taking a beating. I can feel it. Speaking of Neil, this is a pen that Neil uses. He likes it more than I do. There's a similar brush tip that I use a lot more than he did that is same manufacturer, so they do similar things. They give similar lines. I like most of my drawing materials and pens to be able to produce a lot of ink. I really like to go quickly. I like a lot of spontaneity in the line. Neil tended to like his lines a little bit cleaner. He just wasn't as painterly. Everybody does their own thing. I have no issue with Neil's work. In fact, he was my childhood favorite artist. I think that he always thought that I drew too quickly, but I have my own style. I've got my fans. He could tell that people liked what I was doing, and if you guys know Neil Adams, if you have something and it works well, do it. He was very supportive of me. I really, really miss him. I learned a lot from his work, an absolute lot. If you guys want to know partially where some of my approaches from Lego Bionicle comes from, it's Neil's my biggest artistic influence, and I'm sure there's some echoes in what I'm doing to the way he did it. The way he would have done it. He didn't draw a Lego Bionicle, but he drew lots of other comparable robots and things. That's not a bad looking axe right there. By the way, you can continue to ask me some questions if you have any. We're not done. Let's go on and get Axon's head here. If you don't get the head right, you got nothing, right? Let's get this right. So here's the other thing. I'm also just getting a lot of the baselines down. I mean, I'm going to come in with some wet media and really turn this into a full-on Sayger piece. The things that it has that make it that'll make it uniquely mine have yet to been added. I will often use my fingers to smear inks and paints with. You can see I'm drawing all of this freehand. Even that was supposed to be a straight line. Well, when I drew the Lego Bionicle comic book, I would sometimes draw them freehand and sometimes I would draw them with a ruler. You'd think it comes down to, what's the issue? Is it I'm lazy? Is it, why do what one way sometime and others another? And the reality is, distance, how detailed something needs to be, how far away an object is will affect techniques you want to use, but also it affects the feel of the book. If people are fighting and there's, an earthquake or something going on, I'll go ahead and make things drawn by hand. I want it rocky. I want it, and by rocky, I mean moving around and unstable. And I want Axon here sort of charging towards us, so I feel like drawing my lines in a spontaneous manner. Maybe they're not quite as solid or precise, but they've got a greater action to them. Let's see here. Do you guys hear my dog? My dog is getting restless. You guys, I've got a great dog, but dog thinks that live feeds and Bionicle is not much interesting beyond chewing on it. She's very sweet, but I really hope that I don't drop any of these pieces on the floor, because it's off to eBay for replacements if anything like that happens. They'll get gobbled up. That's not a bad little Axon head. I've cheated a little bit on here for what it actually looks like, but I think it gives it a little bit more character. I'm not afraid to do that. Let's see if we have any other comments here. Let's see. Oh, Mara, you turned in. So nice of you to see you. Let's see. Let's see. Sedenbach says, oh yeah, Adams has me beat. I spent time in Florida, but not Georgia as a kid. Yes, okay, let's see. Steve, do you wonder which character was the most complicated to draw? There were a few. There was that giant beast that was made out of Axon and Piraka together. He was hard to draw. I'll tell you what was hardest as far as, like, not necessarily character, but body parts. So you might have some characters that could have, like, ball and socket joints, like this right here, like the hand, and you could screw up and get it upside down. And you don't want that. You want it to sort of always line up the direction you need it. You know, a hip could get twisted around all the way like that, and you don't want that. So making sure that everything was facing the direction you wanted and not too... Like, you could have the feet face forward, have the hip face forward, but have the leg be completely off. And so there would be times where you'd say, okay, I have to make sure everything is lined up properly. And then sometimes you'd even draw it. If you had positioned the character in an odd angle and he suddenly looked too thin, you might twist the leg so that it looked thick. It wouldn't be how he would normally stand, but because it was plausible and it gave a nice weight to the figure, you might do some things like that. Now here's where this stuff back here becomes really important, because I want him to hunch over, so I'm going to really have it come up higher on his back than it actually normally would on the toy. But doing so will make it look like he's leaning over more. If Zane is still watching, I'm sure Zane is laughing and rolling his eyes because these little bits I added isn't exactly what this thing looked like, and I'm guilty of saying, yeah, but it sort of holds the same position in space. It sort of represents the same thing. It's not as accurate, but this is the part that I'm focusing on. Now this arm is going to be hard to draw because it's coming towards me, and I would pop it off the figure to where I could handle it better, and back in the day I would have, but the reality is I don't want to break anything, and these things, plastic gets old. I think the Bionicle toys have been very resilient, and I think it'll pop off with no problem. But as you know, occasionally has something where you get a little bit of plastic fatigue. It's funny though, I've got my Lego toys from when I was little, and I mean, I can play with Legos that are 40 and 50 years old, just, like they're new. It's so great that they're interchangeable. They just work and work and work. But the ball and socket joints, from my experience, those are the ones that were most delicate. And I did have a friend who, when I got this job, he wasn't a big comic book guy, but he was really excited to see them. And he said, these are amazing toys. And I said, yeah, they're really cool. Well, what he meant was he was a plastics engineer. And he just said, like, you have no idea. He said, like, these are, if you want to know one of the reasons that Legos can be expensive, it's because they take a very specific hydrated plastic. If you're going to have a ball and socket joint that can pop inside one another and not crack and not break, but still have tension, that is really demanding. I mean, the quality control in that plastic has to be really, really high. And I never thought like that, not once. He told me that. This also isn't the pen I probably would have drawn this with back then, but it's a little bit faster, and you can see I'm trying to stay moving. So I am going faster than I otherwise would have, but I was typically pretty fast because I like the spontaneous lines. I always joke that I'm not good at portraiture either, that the skill I'm really lacking is I'm not good at looking at something and drawing it. I typically like to take a look at the toy once, make a mental snapshot. Okay, I know what it is, and make something up. And you can't do that with Bionicle. It needs to be a little bit more accurate, a little bit more on model. I'm going to cheat here and add a little block to make his shoulder connect a little bit different, but he doesn't really have that. But that's the sort of thing where we might add a little bit of girth. This too, that's not really, he's got things like that on his back that bump out, but they're not really there. Not at this angle. But by doing that, it holds the figure together a little bit better. I'm getting close to where I'm going to come in here and add some ink to this, and I'm going to tell you, you guys are really going to like it when I ink it, because that's where it's really going to become a Sayger piece, and people are going to say, there it is, now it looks like you. What do you think? It's got some pretty good pieces looking thus far. Let's go back. More comments. Let's see. What was some of your favorite Neil Adams comics? Oh, well, we can talk about that. I really like Detective 408, The House That Haunted Batman. I like when he does comedy, if you can believe that. He did some things in National Lampoon that are kind of funny. You know, when he can draw people really mugging and making jokes. His X-Men were wonderful. Tom Palmer, for my personal taste, over-inked him a little bit, which is kind of ridiculous. That's like, it's like reading somebody's, essay and saying, I give you a 99, not a 100. Adams was a guy that when he drew a comic, if I didn't have it, I was going to buy it. I fell in love with his stuff when I was really young, and he definitely was an influence on me. And it was interesting because he, if you guys haven't heard this story, I feel like maybe you're one of the few audiences that hadn't heard it. Neil and I got in an argument at a show. I'm not kidding. I didn't know him. I knew his work. I loved him. Loved his work. But I didn't really know him. And we got in an argument, and it basically had to do with like how we set up our booths and the space they took up, so on and so forth. And I had a big display of my art, and there were some people that he knew that really didn't like the big walls of prints and such like that. And I just said, like, look, I'm here trying to show my art. This is how it looks best. And he just kind of felt like, well, I don't think it's very fair to have a big wall like that. And I just said, like, Neil, I got one table, you got 20. There's nothing fair about that. And I even told him, I said, you don't want it fair. And in fact, I understand you're a big star, and that's why they give you a big table, but you can't say that it's fair. It's certainly not equal. And I remember saying to him, I said, look, here's the thing. I mean, you're the big cat here. You're going to sell the most art out of anybody. I believe that to be true. I'm sure you're going to outsell me. But I said, but I'm not going to get out of your way to make it easy. I have just as much right to be here to sell my art and meet the fans as you do. Chances are you're gonna sell more and meet more and do more than I will. But my job is to be the best artist I can, show my work, and compete, not just for the fans here, but for all the jobs, all the work, everything. That's how this works. And he had a lot of respect for that. And I could tell it, even as it sounded like I was kind of mouthing off to him. He took it. He liked it. It rang true. And ever since that happened, he liked me. And I would see him at shows, and he would say hi to me. And the man did so many favors for me over the years. And I thought it was awfully cool that he saw the kid who was going to try hard, and he liked him. That was me. This is where this thing's going to come alive, and you're going to really be happy. Now, one of the things that's not good about having paper that's quite like this, I can't quite get it wet enough. That is to say, you can see I'm smearing things around and doing some lighting things. I can only smear it so far. When the paper's really rough, it's referred to as being thirsty. And when it's thirsty, it sucks up the ink. If the ink could stand on top, I could smear it more, but it won't do that. Not with thirsty paper, and that's porous paper. That's rough paper. That's a reason to not do it this way. Not enough to make me stop, though. What do you guys think? How is it looking? Let's see. Next question. One thing I really liked was the very cool Takia shark drawings you made as part of the Mari Nui. How was making that compared to drawing a set? Because that felt like a very biological looking design. Man, I think this is what I'm thinking of. It's like we have to make this stuff up sometimes. I mean, this is kind of what I'm talking about. You get asked to do things that aren't in the Bionicle universe, and sometimes you have to make them up. I mean, I could have to occasionally make up like a sea monster or something like that. And it's like, I want to make a cool looking sea monster. You don't want it so cool that somebody's so distracted and they're like, wow, I want to build that sea monster, because there isn't a set for the sea monster, and there's not going to be. I always kind of felt that villains need to be threatening. They have to look cool. They have to be capable. So if you like that shark, it was me basically saying like, all right, here's the hero.
here's if the shark is going to be a threat, how cool does the hero look? What would be a good enough, threat that he's up to for the challenge? By the way, you guys, you have no idea how good my dog is being. I think she's going to get some chicken tonight. What do you think of that, Addie? I think she deserves it. Should I give my dog some chicken? Let's see. What's the next question here? Let's see. Do you have a favorite brand of pens for inking on paper you prefer, and then the paper that DC was assigned to you? I usually like ones that are wet. Everybody uses something different. A lot of it comes down to tip. So nothing beats drawing with a proper brush. It's just the way it is. But having said that, I like the Faber-Castell pens, which is what I'm using right now. They're really inexpensive. They're very wet. I know a lot of people like microns and such, and those are good pens too. But there's a little bit of a relationship. You get used to something that works a certain way, and so you keep using it. I remember Kurt Cobain said he had a guitar that he got from a pawn shop, and it wouldn't stay in tune. And it was not a good guitar, but he loved the way it sounded. And, if he could put up with having to tune it all the time and fight it, for the 5 minutes or whatever that it was in tune, it made the sounds he wanted. And I feel like a lot of art supplies sort of work that way. If it gives you what you want and it works, for however long or short, sometimes you put up with those things. None of this is perfect. Digital's perfect because you can do undo, except guess what? They say there's digital painting, and I may kick off a firestorm here, but digital painting to me looks like digital painting. It doesn't look like painting. If you want it to look like a paint, you got to use paint. So here's what I got to do. I draw the Kiss comic book. I do covers for this for the Rock Band, and in this case, it's in a plastic bag, and I'm going to use the back of this to keep ink off my table. If you're wondering what I have that I'm doing here, it happened to be a handy comic book that I worked on, so I'm reusing it. Now, some of this is a little smeary. See how I got into Axon's head there? That is okay, because I like to work opaquely, and we're going to introduce some black, some white paint here in a little while, and it'll solve any sort of problems I have. Not any of them, but most of the problems I have of like drawing over an object like that. We can make it work. Because what I can do is I can put in this lighting here and come back in with a white pen and reintroduce light to the figure. It's not an all or nothing proposition. You get a lot of good textures and a lot of highlights and things when you use a lot of black, and you can put white back on top of them. It's also another reason to use a rough paper like I'm using is very simply this. I'm concerned about making these things look too cold, too robotic. We talked about making them look more lifelike. Well, the roughness of the paper adds in a rough variable to the line art. It keeps it from being too uniform. It's what allows me to have built-in texture when I smear. These are the things where you pick a paper that's different like this. Let the materials do some of the work for you. How does the thing behave? Okay, well, if that's the way it behaves and it works for you, you incorporate it, you plan on it, you don't fight against it. It's an asset. Okay, here's where the lighting starts to get tricky, and this is where I earn my keep, where I'm a better artist than some.
If you want an art lesson, here it is. All your lighting is relative. It's not absolute. This is white. This is black. This looks brighter because it's next to something that's darker. This looks darker because it's next to something that's lighter. What I want to do is I've got some areas that are gray where I've kind of smeared things. And to make areas look brighter, you put something dark next to it. So Axon's got his arm coming forward here. These pieces here are flat panels that should be reflecting light. Well, I can't add any more white to that that's not already there, so all I can do is put black around it. By putting more black around it, I make the areas that are left white appear to be brighter. And it's really something that I do kind of by feel. Have to do a lot of it and sort of learn how it works. And once I've got a feel for it, then I can make some sort of bold decisions. And now again, I'm going to come back here with some white, and this will come alive. I hope you guys are enjoying this, because I think this is looking to be a good drawing this far. Let's see. Oh, Gustavo gave me a drink, which I think is a reference to me saying Neil Adams' name or something. On my live feeds, other live feeds where I draw, I'm often make my fingers dirty or do some other things. You can tell me what the drink was for this time. Let's see. Sent about Stuart Sayger. If you tell me a few Bionicle characters and or races types, perhaps I can try emulating him with those Bionicle-like Transformers I mentioned earlier. Well, maybe when I see in person we can talk about that, because I got to tell you, both worlds are pretty convoluted. The characters are pretty diverse and pretty hairy. Let's see. Yes, Gustavo, there is Stu DNA in the art. Yeah, this is that merged character Steve posted the link to, and he was hard to draw. How was your last convention? How was the crowd? Last convention I did was C2E2, and the crowd was great. I was so happy to see so many people I hadn't seen for a long time. I'm still wearing a mask. There are a lot of people who have been vaccinated, but there's some who haven't been. There's some who can't. I've got friends who have children, they can't get them vaccinated. And so I just felt like I see a lot of kids at comic book shows. I'm going to wear a mask for them. But I was able to see friends, people I hadn't seen in a long time. That was great. I know that Zane is tuned in tonight, and I got to see him this last weekend, and that was great. Let's see. I'm going to chop in this form a little bit more. Again, putting more black next to a white to make it brighter. I call it chopping in because I'm picking a hard edge and cutting away from it. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just sort of a mental trick that I say to communicate to myself what I'm doing. Oh, you need to cut that in, chop that in. It's like there's not light there, but then I chop it in by putting a dark next to it. Okay, I got any other questions or comments here? Let's see. What else am I asked here? Actually, sets from this era onward are notoriously fragile in the joints, unfortunately. I kind of wondered about that, Liam. That's a good comment. Let's see. Is that the combination of the two Bionicles I assume that Stuart mentioned? Mike Grell has always been a favorite of mine. Grell is really great. I had my table next to Grell one time, and he drew a Green Arrow with his eyes shut, and I drew a Batman with my eyes shut, and we traded. My Batman was okay. His Green Arrow was phenomenal. I don't know how he did it. It was crushing. Let's see. Have you been to or considered coming to Toronto Comic Con and Fan Expo? Do you keep me posted? I live in that area. Okay, Liam, we should look into that. I would really like to come. I know the Fan Expo people, but I haven't done a show in Toronto for years. Actually, the best way to get me there is for you to contact them and say that you'd like for me to come. And particularly if you want to set something up, we might be able to do something Bionicle related at the show, which would be really cool. They like that sort of thing, and if you mention that, then they make a point of trying to bring me in. I think that would be a lot of fun. We should look into that. Have you seen Sandman? Like it? I haven't seen it yet. I need to. Wow. Roxanne Moore is here. Roxy, how are you? Man, you were someone who was around for all of this.
Don't you wish we were as young as we were in 2005? I'll move on from there. Let's see. Do you like brushes made of actual hair, or do you not care? Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate thing about that is a sable hair brush. There's nothing like it. Using animal hair is kind of a problem, but you know, it is a fiber that man hasn't been able to reproduce. Everything behaves differently. The funny thing is, I've used old brushes. I've used old sable hair brushes. I've used old nib brushes, and everything behaves differently. You can even have paper that a company will tell you it's the exact same formula, but if it's made on a different machine, or if the tree sources are different, you know, you got to consider all the chemistry that goes into this. This stuff is even if you bought two brushes that are exactly the same, and they're made from the same factory at the same moment, they can be different. I remember talking to a lot of artists who use metal nibs. They'll tell you can buy a box of metal nibs, and some are good and some are bad. And a lot of artists will even alter a brush or a metal nib while they're using it. They'll use sandpaper, or they'll use very small scissors, and they'll shape and reform the things to make it behave in a way they want. So, you know, you can say, oh, I use the same brush that this other artist uses. It's like, yeah, but they've modified it, or you've modified it, or you're using a different ink. You know, I use the same basketball Michael Jordan uses, but I don't get the same results. I can tell you that right now. Let's see. I haven't done much with horsehair. It's a coarser hair, but you can work with it for sure. Let's see. I am surprised how immaculate your Axon model is, knowing your style. This is a testament to how clean you do work. Well, thanks for that, because believe me, this is about to come alive. I'm getting to the point where I'm going to introduce some white paint to it again, and this is really going to sparkle. If you guys are still watching, please stick around, because it's going to get better. Let's see. Sedum says, I don't know about Lego plastics recently, but I know Hasbro's been having yellowing plastic with WFC and Legacy figures. Luckily, hasn't been figures with ball and socket joints. Yeah, the ball and socket joints, I mean, I don't know enough about this. You guys do, but I would figure if you have a Lego and you snap the ball and socket together, you leave it there. Let's see. You can easily de-yellow old plastic. Just use isopropyl alcohol by rubbing alcohol and vinegar, soaking it. I would not have known that. Peroxide works the best way. Let's see, this is a bunch of yellowing. Aaron Boggs, always a masterclass. That's the comment I love. Thanks for pumping up my ego. Plenty of comments from the chat. Complimenting the progress. Thank you. I'm glad you guys like it. Let's see. A fun challenge is to do blind drawing. Man, is that true? Okay, I'm going to get back to this and focus on this for a second, but please continue to ask questions. Stephen, if you have any that seem like they're really some good ones that are over from the other feed and we want to give them time, let's have them. So what I'm going to do at this point, this thing is not done, but I'm going to do some erasing and sort of see what I have. The funny thing is, this, you talk about something that'll also eat up your eraser. Crumbs come from this rougher paper immediately. It's just like using sandpaper. So I'm cleaning this up. We're going to get down to our figure, see what's here, see what's not here. Now, the interesting thing to remember, too, is I didn't use any grays. I've got areas where I allowed the paper grain to come through the black, but I didn't use like a Copic, the gray marker, or anything like that. I don't really do much of that. I've got some, but I'd rather have all my grays worked out in a textured surface. And part of the reason for that is I think it gives the thing more a naturalistic look to it. Now, I've done a lot of interesting work with lighting in comics for a long time now, trying to use lights and darks on top of one another to give me the technique I'm looking for, and or give me the look I'm looking for. And the thing that happens a lot is I'll get to about this point and I'll go back and forth between adding lights and adding darks. And sometimes I don't know what I need to do in one area until I do something in another area. There's a little bit of a ping pong effect. And where I'm going with that is, soon I'm going to add some white paint on Axon's face. And when I do, it's going to affect the relative sense of brightness of other parts of the drawing. And I'm going to jump around adding lights and darks back and forth, saying, oh, like here's one already. See Axon's eyes here? They're going to glow. This is really key. They're going to give off a lot of light. The axe is at a plane where it would reflect the light to the viewer pretty well. What's also really at a plane to do that is the side of this raised object here. So I'm going to have a strong white in there. I said the tops of these are going to be white, and they would have stayed white as though I have a downlight here, but I think his face is more important. I want the light from his eyes to really look bright. And so that side of that edge of that block that's going to reflect back to me, it needs to be really, really bright, probably one of the brightest things here, which means I have to darken this up a little bit. I wasn't going to do that, but once I start playing with the math of how the lights play with one another, I have to darken those up. But you'll see. You're probably saying, gosh, this whole thing's getting dark. Well, it will, but I'm about to add some white paint, pull it back. See this post? It's in front of the glowing lights. These should be dark. In fact, a lot of this should be dark. We'll just chop that in like that. Here we go. Okay, so what I like to do when I add white is usually use this thing. It's a Presto correction pen. It's a whiteout pen. I usually get started on my thumb. I can talk about this a lot. If you guys ever want to use one of these, go to your office supply store and buy this. It's $5 to $8. Here's the thing. It's really finicky. It's got a tip on it that's a needle. It's not a ballpoint pen, so it flows differently than a lot of things. And the heat of your hand makes the liquid and air inside it expand. And so I like to not touch it any more than I have to, because when it's got pressure inside it, it flows in a different way, and I don't like it. They'll never tell you this, and this aren't criticisms of the thing. I've used it enough that I'm kind of intimate with it, and I know how it's going to behave. But see how it added a nice white paint, and I was able to get that light back in his eyes. Now, to really make his eyes look bright, I have to put in more black around him and darken up this ridge. Once you do all this, those eyes really start to glow. Now, so that's my primary light source. I've got another light source gleaming down here. So I'm going to start cutting back in with some highlights, sort of define these areas that will catch more light. And you're going to like this drawing a lot in a hurry. Come on, buddy. I need it to work. It's a finicky tool sometimes. Doesn't help that I've got that comic under it, does it? There's some other spots. I need that. That should be illuminated. Let's work on his head here a little bit. Come on. There we go. Boy, it really is rough, and it's grabbing the pen a little bit differently than I'm used to. Only because I haven't used this paper in so long. It's doing just fine, just not familiar with it. Let's get the top of his knuckles here. Now, I'm going to make him look really cool. Let's have some fun with it. it's got a little bulb bearing in it, so you can shake the paint in this. It really is just to allow it to flow better. You don't want to make too many of these, and you don't want to make them all the same size either. But if you find the right spots, and you get I can't even tell people where to find these, or that is, find them, like determine where they should go. I've drawn long enough, I can kind of feel where they go relative to what my light sources are. Here he's looking pretty good. And I'm going to use this F, the small pen, and by putting a little bit of black around some of these highlights, it creates a stronger contrast between the areas of light and dark, and it makes the form jump out a little bit. It's kind of a cheat. It's not really what the eye would see, but it is what photography does a lot. So we've looked at enough TV and photography. It happens more in television, where you get this like fake contrast. We've looked at enough that the eye starts saying, yeah, that looks real. It's not real. It's not even how things really work, but it's strangely convincing. What do you guys think? Let's see if we have any other comments here. Let's see. Sedum, man, you have got the comments. I can't touch all of them. Let's see. Let's see. What am I going back to? Let's see. Been way too long. Afternoon from Melbourne. Matt Arcaro, how are you? It has been a long time. Matt, you should know I'm doing an Alice Cooper comic. Did the covers for that, so you'll want to dig on those. Let's see. What are the other things you've worked on with Lego besides Bionicle? Nothing really. I'm trying to think. So, I was talked about, I was approached maybe about doing something on Ninjago one time, but I didn't have the time to do it. So this is really it. Let's see. Is that a not fully unwrapped kneaded eraser? I don't know, probably. Oh, this thing here, this is a makeup sponge, if that's what you saw me using. I'm guessing that's probably what you were asking about. How many drawings do I do in a day? Most days I don't do any. I shouldn't even tell you that. The hardest part of being a comic book artist is that drawing's the part you know how to do best, but you got to do all the other stuff. I have to do taxes regularly. I have to write emails regularly. I have to scan. If I do a show, I have to pack for a show and then unpack for a show. I really should be drawing more. I draw as much as I can, and when I say most days I don't draw, that's not true. But there are days that go by where I don't get to draw at all, and I will work 12 hours that day. Let's see. What are some other good questions here? Make the eyes really come alive. Yeah, thank you. I do a similar thing with white gel pens. Oh, these are very similar. So I don't like gel pens as much as some other people do. Not that there's anything wrong with them. If they work for you, use them. I'm just not used to them. But it's the exact same approach. Let's see. Don't know if it was covers or interiors as well, but he had art in the Vampirilla art books. Yes, I did. Let's see, what paper do you normally use now? I'm guessing it's just normal art paper. I like to draw on Strathmore 300 series paper, which Bristol board, which is fine paper. They make higher grade papers, but 300 is kind of what I got used to, and so I've stayed with it. When I do some pen and ink work and I want stuff that's a little bit more fine, you can go to 400 or 500. 500 is really nice. You know, the more rag content, meaning cotton, the better the paper you've typically got. That's the place to go. Let's see what I've got here. I love how the highlights and rim light make him pop off the page. Thank you. I don't know that feeling as if Lego, whoops, I tried to scroll and I lost your comment, it jumped. I know that feeling as a Lego artist as well. Most days you don't get to build, you just do the busy work. Man, that's true. You mentioned earlier that you can still play with your old Lego sets and how they hold up. What Lego sets do you have as a kid? Have any favorites? Yeah, we can talk about that in just a second. So let's see. I had the red and white spaceman, and I loved those. There was like a spaceship that was kind of flat and had big blue windows, and I always wanted that. I never had it, but I had a couple of I had the moon-based rocket set, which I thought was really cool. And I always thought it was weird that they were blue and red, because to me, or white and red, because I always thought, is this like subtly like United States astronauts and Russian? It just kind of, in the 80s, it kind of seemed like that's what they were. I don't know. I was always frustrated because I would end up building things where I needed some of the bumps to go upright and then others to go upside down. I remember I kept trying to use two hinged windows and have them open like this so they could be like a mouth. But they can't do that. You can't put them upside down. So I did my best I could. Sometimes you cheat and use pieces that were flat on top to create a flat surface where you could have things that would not connect but touch, where you otherwise would have had a gap. I had a couple friends who had Legos, and if there's anything that's frustrating about Legos, and I'm sure you guys will all agree with me on this, they're great to play with. You could go to your friend's house and they had Legos and you could dump them out and build anything you wanted. But like, if I played with G.I. Joe or Transformers or something like that, I could bring my G.I. Joes and Transformers and play. I could have mine, you could have yours, we could mix them together, and at the end of the day, we could sort them out and everybody got their own toys back. You can't do that with Legos. You just can't. Yeah. All right, so most of this is in place. I'm going to tighten this up in a few spots and then maybe do a few more little things with some lighting and call this kind of done. But you know what? I might get out the airbrush and do some highlight things on this. That could be kind of fun. I have to go in the other room, and you'd have to forgive me because I'd have to step away and get it. But if you guys think you'd like to see me use the airbrush on this, I can. You'll have to put something in the comments section, or else I won't think you care. This is where it pays to pay attention. You can tell me what you want done. This is going to be darker, I think. Yeah, that helps. So the funny thing is, because I like to play with lighting so much, I realized that, dramatic lighting often has a lot of darks, and then your highlights, which are somewhat limited, they become the points of interest and excitement. So the more black I'm putting on this, the more it makes his eyes really jump out. That's what I'm going for. I don't want to lose too much of the figure because we want to be able to see him somewhat. I mean, he's cool, right? But we can control what's important on this piece and what people pay attention to. I think he's looking really good. I hope you guys agree. This might be one I have to digitally color. What do you think? Would that be fun? Let's do that. Maybe I won't use the airbrush because the airbrush is so destructive. I can digitally color this, and then I can post the digital color, and you guys can see that. I think you'll like that better. Yeah, I changed my mind. I know I just asked you about the airbrush, but I started thinking about it. I said, no. Save it so you can tighten it up digitally. That'll look really nice. While I'm at it, I'm going to do a little bit more work here on the highlights and shadows, just to make it have a little bit more crispness, a bit more pop to it. That was a really subtle thing there. I took away that highlight and I turned this more into a silhouette. It allows that shoulder to come forward more, be brighter, and make the axe come forward as well. See how I'm building all that black up? Because I said I wanted that white area to be really white. That's how I'm pulling it off. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with this right now. Probably come in and add a little bit of more white paint in a few places. Let's see. You're the artist. Nice comment. Thank you. It makes me feel better. Travis, I thought I was going to do it. I changed my mind. I think it's going to work better this way. But you know, I can maybe do both. I can scan it, color digitally, and then add airbrush, and then I'd have two versions if I want to. So now it looks like he's stepping from the shadows into the light source. Yep, that's the goal. This could use a little heart, stronger black. Make a better silhouette there. This thing is just abusing these pens. I'm telling you, I've used only $30 worth of pens got used on making this thing, but like I said, it's worth it. Also, I'll even smear the white paint with my finger just to get the effect I want. So what do you guys think? By the way, would you like more Bionicle comic books? Tell the truth. I heard no hesitation. I don't know if that was to my question about Bionicle comics or not. I'd like to do more Bionicle comics. I think it'd be fun to write these things. I got to tell you, though, I don't know if I could keep up with Farshti. I mean, he's the master. But, you know, anybody who plays, I feel that anybody who plays with this stuff, we've all imagined stories we'd want to have them do, the adventures we want them to have. How am I going to do this? That is breaking up that black just to give it a little bit extra depth there. Put some highlights back in that. Give it a little bit more depth that way. A lot of this going back and forth with your lights and darks is, you know, pushing the objects back and bringing them forward. It's a little bit of both. I put in a little cutout in his head there. It's not really actually there, but it makes on the toy, but it makes a nice sort of shape for a little bit more depth. That's where I cheat sometimes on the design. I've got the opportunity to have a really nice cool silhouette against this background. Make it a little bit more solid. So that's what I'm doing there. Well, what do you guys think? I'm going to change my camera view so we can get a good look at it. How's that? I got to tell you, this one, last year's came out pretty good, but this one's better. If you disagree, that's fine, but I'll be very surprised. Let's get this camera out of the way here, and I'll adjust my lighting. How's that? Not too bad. I'm pretty pleased with that. Now, I promised to Piraka. I couldn't find my Piraka figure, so we had to do an Axon. But I'm telling you, I'll color this up. It'll look really, really cool. I'm sure I'll take it to Seattle with me. So you guys, if you want to see it in person, I'll have it there.
And you know, I made a really cool looking Takanuva not too long ago, and I kind of feel like this makes a nice companion piece to it. So thank you very much for tuning in. I love all the hearts. I love all the smiles. Let me tell you, I hope that I can return to Bionicle someday, and I hope they'll make some more comics. I'd love to come back and do this with you guys again. If you ever get the chance to come see me in person, ask me about Bionicle. I'd love to talk about it. If any of you wanted a custom piece, come see me at a show. I can do it that way as well. And also, I'll tell you, as I plugged it before, I've done a lot of things outside of Bionicle. If you tune in on Facebook and Instagram, I should have some live feeds coming up later around the 26th of August. I've got an all Deja Thoris show I'm going to be doing because I've got the new Deja Thoris. By the way, 6 exclusive Deja Thoris covers. If you like pretty girls, I'm going to have that. That's the sort of comic that I'm going to be selling there. And what else have I got? I got other things I didn't get to show this time. I'll save them for next time. Are we going to do this again next year? I'll bet we can. Let me read the last little comments I have before we sign off on all this. I really want to thank you guys for tuning in. Steve, if we have any comments that we need to address, let me know. Thank you, Monica. I'm glad you like it. Aaron, really nice to see from you. I hope I get to cross paths with you in person here. Liam, I can't thank you enough for putting this together. I really mean that. Steven as well. Both you guys have been really, really good to me. I love this community. I'm delighted you guys are keeping the Bionicle world alive. I think that I don't think we've seen the end of it. And for you guys who are doing things like making custom figures out of the designs, the ones I made, I think that stuff is totally cool. I mean, this is toys, all about making other toys. So why wouldn't we do it? Let's see if I have any other comments here. Yeah, Liam, I am down for next year. I'd love to come. Anyway, check out my website if you would. It's on the corner of the screen here. It's stuartsayger.com. I know I've got some of the few Bionicle comic books that I have left there. There are a couple pieces of the Bionicle art that I had shown where you can see it in like pencil inked piece. Some pieces didn't show up in the magazine, just a few. So you can see some behind the scenes stuff there. But follow me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram. It's just my name, Stuart Sayger. And I will color up, and you do want to follow me for that because I will color up this Axon and I'll post it there where you guys can see it. So, anything else we should address? Yeah. I don't know if you'll see me on the 18th or not because I'm going to go live once I get the comic book. It's supposed to... The Deja Thoris comes out on the 26th, but I usually get them early, so I might be live on the 18th. For those of you who know, I'm usually showing up on Thursday. So, and listen, I'll find Brutaka. I'll make Brutaka. We need a Brutaka. I mean, if I have a Brutaka that's the same pose, but instead he's got his, I don't know what you call that blade he's got. It could be a mirrored image. They'd look really cool side by side. So... one final comment from, let's see, Sean. Hello, Stuart. I just popped by to say how excellent you were as the artist for the first years of Bionicle Ignition Story. Your art was perfect in the atmosphere of the Voya Nui and gave it an air of mystery and danger. That's my job, and I love hearing it. I'm telling you, I'm going to go out on this. I really tried to make this book interesting. I tried to make it different. I knew that I was making it in a style that was a little different than what a lot of the people who'd come before me were. I know there were some people who didn't like it at first. It was a different flavor, different style. People have told me when they were young they didn't like it. They get it now. And if I wasn't your favorite growing up, I'll ask you give it another shot because I actually think that my art was designed to appeal to an older audience, and a lot of people have told me they like it better later on. If I'm still not your favorite artist, that's fine, but thanks for giving me a shot. I worked really hard on it, and I tried to do something that I thought was good and was different. So at the very least, you can't say that I didn't try hard. And also, thanks for everybody who tuned in on Twitter. Thanks for Twitch, excuse me, and thanks for those who followed on Facebook. And if we don't have anything else, I'll probably sign off. Steve and Liam, I'm going to leave it to you. Are we done? I'll bet we are.
Okay, I'm seeing lots of smiley faces and happiness. That tells me you guys are ready to go. Come see me next year. We'll do it all again, okay? Take care. Good night, everybody. This is the actual sign off right here. Bye-bye.